All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're really happy to see the attendance here today. We've got a great program coming up for you. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off right now. I'm Terry Mooney. I'm the current president of AF Orlando, but I won't be for long. Coming in July is going to be Chris Bear. So next board year is going to prove to be a great year for the club as well. And we'll be hopefully pretty close to completely post-pandemic. So we're really looking forward to some in real life events and programs as well. We've had a great time doing them virtual this year, but we know that that gets a little bit taxing as well. So today we have a great program for you. Well, let's go about AAF Orlando. Thank you, Ralphie. So AAF Orlando is a member of the American Advertising Federation's 4th District. The American Advertising Federation is a national association that's been around in one form or another since about 1905. AAF Orlando is comprised of 2 organizations. AF Orlando for, I guess, senior marketing folks, and then Add to Orlando for those just starting out in the industry. So there's a little bit of a catering to the content that both of those segments likes and needs. And if you're in business, then you're in advertising. Of course, you all know we work with about every single industry and business out there. So we really are the gasoline to the economic engine of the country. And we want to make sure that we keep our association strong and that everybody is aware of the role that we play. Big special thank you to our sponsors. So we have Push Button Creative Audio, Yash and John, who do so much and have been so involved with AAF for many, many years. We really appreciate that and all you do for the club. Outfront Media for their generosity. Concrete Lion Pictures, who has helped with the Ad Vanguard video series. Please be sure to catch that series, and we have more coming up. You can catch them on, I think, our YouTube channel and link there from our website. It's a great video series that highlights individuals in our community. Adrenaline Films for all the help they gave us on the Addy reel that we did this year. And then their president, Michael, was nominated and was our silver medal recipient for this year as well. And then PR Breakthrough Boot Camp from AMPR, which you're going to hear from today. We have Ashley Moore presenting to us. So I'd like to introduce Ashley Moore, the founder and CEO of AM Public Relations. And she's going to present to us today on public relations essentials, everything that you need to know if you're not a public relations person, but still that comes in handy, I think, for every single one of us, that knowledge and that expertise. And so Ashley is going to break it down for us and give us some great tactics and education today. So we're very, very grateful, Ashley, to have you today. And everybody, please post your questions in the chat and we will get to those after Ashley's done with her presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley Moore.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for having me. This is going to be fun. I'm going to share my screen now to show you a little presentation that goes along with the discussion today. So my goal here is really to educate you guys a little bit on Media Relations 101. Media relations is a large component of public relations efforts. A lot of times I find in our experience on the agency side and working with marketing and advertising partners and my friends in marketing and advertising that working with the press is where things start to get a little dicey for them. It is a little bit of a different art than some of the stuff that the content creation and other storytelling that you're doing as marketers and advertising experts. So I want to help you take some of that storytelling capability that you have and walk you through a little bit about how you might transition that narrative to be appropriate for a press audience. So that's really the introduction we're going to work through a little bit today. So I have an agency, but we have also created this program called PR Breakthrough Bootcamp, and this is building on some of the sessions that you would get as a part of that online course. So today's focused on walking you through how do you take that story from pitch to publication at a high level and introduce you to some of those concepts. So today you'll get an idea of how the newsroom works, how to craft a good story idea for the media, and then how do you actually target that story. And the idea here is that you can achieve small scale media relations efforts when you don't have the bandwidth or the budget for a full-on PR partner. It's possible. You just have to be very intentional about the story that you're taking, and very strategic about the story that you want to tell. So the first breakthrough here is what I call the 5 W's of the newsroom. So this is going to take you through what you should be considering when you're thinking about telling a story to the press. So the what, the where, the when, the why, and the who. So when you are looking at pitching something to the press, first you need to think about what type of media outlet that you want to take this story to. What type of media outlet would be interested in this story? Is this something that's really industry specific and trade oriented? Is this something that's highly regional? So only the Orlando Sentinel is going to be interested in it and not the, Tampa Bay media, but you want both, or does this story actually have national implications or national reach? So what type of media outlet does your story bucket into? Where? So again, considering geographic elements of your story. So does the outlet you've chosen have specific geographic parameters or boundaries that you have to note? So take the Orlando market. Some of you know that Orlando's media market is fairly vast in terms of going, all the way up Volusia County, et cetera. But you would be probably surprised, or you would like to know that when it comes to earned press with the Orlando market, it's very challenging to get the media to pay attention to the market, the outskirts of the market. So when you're planning a media relations story, there's even elements like that you have to consider of, geographically, my story is based in somewhere in Volusia County. Will the Orlando Sentinel even pay attention to me? That is, for right or for wrong, but that's the reality of a truly earned piece of coverage. Then you have when. So when does the publication publish? When do they write their stories? Are they writing, multiple stories every day? Does this reporter look like they're publishing 3 times a day? Is this reporter publishing once a week? The Orlando Business Journal publishes on a Friday. You know that if you want to be in the print edition, you have to get to them earlier in the week, because they're not going to have time to get something in the print edition when you bring it to them on a Thursday. So in terms of timing your publication, that's another thing to consider. Or, my story is appropriate for trade that publishes monthly. Your timeline and pitching them is going to look a little bit different. The why. So what is this publication's purpose? This goes back a little bit to, is this story of interest to industry, or is it national or regional? Why do people read this publication? What do they look, why are they looking to this publication for something to learn or something to understand? So when you work through that exercise with your story, you can say, this publication's purpose is to cover industry specific trends that national media is not paying attention to. I'm not even going to bother trying to take this to the New York Times. I'm going to focus on leveraging some publicity in this trade publication. And then finally, the who of who you're going to pitch. What are the roles there that you're going to pitch? So are you looking to pitch a journalist who happens to specifically look like they focus on stories in your beat or in that industry? Or is this just a more general business editor who sometimes covers what you're pitching them? There's obviously a lot of different roles in the newsroom, which I could go on and talk about forever, but for the sake of this short webinar, under the point here is that you need to understand the role of the person that you're reaching out to. So breakthrough number 2 here gets to crafting the story. So after going through the 5 W's of the newsroom, you've now understood where you want to take your story to, what you need to consider about the publication, and who you are going to take that story to. So outlet and reporter are now covered to a certain degree at that point. So now we're going to actually take your idea, your press release, whatever it is that you've come up with that you think is news, and we're going to walk it through a formula to make sure that you can make it as sticky as possible, as interesting as possible. So a formula that I've put together for what makes a good story, what journalists will hopefully find interesting, is an ownership topic plus a true like interesting company asset or piece of news, plus a trend, and that equals a sticky story. Because what this does basically is the company asset or news part that's here in the middle is the thing that you want to promote, but the trend is the component that gives the reporter the why they should cover this right now. Here's something interesting that we're doing, and here's why it's important, because it's relative to this trend that you're paying attention to. It's relevant to something going on that your readers are already following, or something that they're not paying attention to, but let me prove to you that they need to because it's a part of this larger trend. So it's the less self-serving component of your story that you're taking to the press, if that makes sense. I'm seeing some chat, so let me see some questions. Okay, I'll try to pay attention to that, but and get to any that are relevant as I go along, and then I'll tackle some at the end. So these are the 3 components that make a sticky story. So when we go to ownership topics, so an ownership topic is something that you want to be known for. It's very easy to say, oh, this shiny thing that's going on over here in the industry, we do a little bit of that too. Let's just get the media hit. So, a great example of that is when a client, I work with a lot of technology clients. So here's an example of that. A client comes to me and says, I'm seeing all these reporters talking about AR, augmented reality. And we kind of do it, but not really, but let's pitch a story about it. And sometimes that's the way to go. That's the end, sometimes. But a lot of times we need to take a step back, have a discussion about, is this what you want to be known for? If you get this story, if we actually happen to get this piece and pull a little bit of smoke and mirrors on this reporter, that's what people who see this story are going to relate you to. That's the line that they're going to connect about your company. Is this what you really want to be known for? Is this the most strategic use of your story, of your narrative? So again, I'm not saying that it's not necessarily the right way to go. If it gets you into the publication that you want to be in, by all means. But the ideal place to start is to say, here's the one thing that we want to own, we want to be attached to, we want to be known for. Because that sets you up to have a cohesive presence in the media. If you are pitching a story a month, which would even be aggressive for a small scale effort, but say you want to pitch a story a month over 3 months, you're aiming to get 3 media hits, and you pitch all of them on extremely different topics. Your company does 4 things and you cover 3 of them, and they seem unrelated, and there's no cohesiveness between the 3 stories. Has that really been the most strategic approach to your media relations efforts? Wouldn't it be great if you focused your story on one ownership topic of those 4 things that your company does? And therefore, when you get the SEO from having a media hit and published online, they see all three of those media hits are relevant to the same ownership topic. You are branded and associated with the same thing. It's a very cohesive and clear presence online, also helping support your SEO. So I hope that that makes sense. You know, it's very easy to chase the shiny object. And again, if you were to have a PR partner or have someone in-house doing public relations all the time, the shiny object stuff can sprinkle in with the strategic stuff. But the reality is that you're trying to really hone your efforts, be very intentional. You need to focus and figure out how to make that ownership topic exciting and not chase other random things that are you're loosely tied to. So that's step one of the story development process. The second piece is asking yourself, what's the hard news element that I have? Now, this may come first. A lot of times there is some asset or company news that is the impetus for you to, start a media relations effort or pitch the press. But let's just say you're like, we need some publicity out there. What can we work with? Then we need to find the hard news element of your story. So a lot of go-to company news elements are, a product or service launch, a merger and acquisition, some sort of exciting partnership, deals, new hires, investors, that sort of company news is usually hard news that would be of interest to press. Then you have go-to company assets. So let's say you don't have anything going on in the left corner that's traditionally new, but maybe you have a fantastic testimonial that's popped up. Maybe you have some sort of data that's come to light that's interesting. Possibly you have a key person of interest, like a KOL, that is now involved in the company that can speak on your behalf and has interesting ideas relevant to the company. If you have a celebrity, that's an obvious, if you're lucky enough to have celebrity impact, that's an obvious one. And then sometimes you have great human interest stories where you can tie a challenge that you're presenting and that applies to your solution, and you can provide a face of the issue. You can provide a great human interest element that helps the reporter realize, hey, this is really important, this is really impactful to readers. So those are other assets you can have that can be a reason to pitch a reporter. Case studies and testimonials are often a great one. I have a note here that sometimes standard company news stories are interesting enough to stand on their own, but most of the time you'll need more meat. So if you're looking at the column on the left, say you have a product or a service launch, it may be exciting enough on its own for you to present, here's the challenge or the problem in the industry I'm in, and here's the solution that we're providing. But it would be even better if you were able to say that and then say, and I have this customer who can speak to you who was testing it in a pilot, or I have I do a lot of healthcare stories. So I have a patient you can interview who actually this technology was used on, or who benefited from this technology, and you can speak to them. So that's you taking the extra step of anticipating a little bit better what the journalist is going to need to tell a really great story. So if when you're putting together a story and you can pull one thing from the left and one thing from the right, you're in a really good space. I'm just looking at the time. Okay, and then trends is the last. Look at micro trends and macro trends. Both work. So tying into a trend that the media is already interested in or should be aware of, and you can prove that they should be aware of it by saying, here's something that's happening in real estate right now that people aren't talking about enough, and here's the data that proves it, or let me pull what's going on in the Orlando housing market for you. That is going to be just the icing on the cake to your story, because again, this is the least self-serving component of your pitch, but it helps the reporter validate that they should be covering this for their readers. I'm not the media, sorry to burst your bubble, but they're not here to promote you. They are here to bring brand visibility and awareness to you by inserting you into conversations and topics that are of interest to their readers. Now, the more you grow, the more you build relationships with reporters, etc., the more likely they are to pay attention to your self-serving news and your self-serving efforts. But in terms of really trying to grab their attention, if you can present a trend that's relevant to your news hook, then you're golden. So breakthrough 3 is the last piece of this that I'll present until we I'll break for some questions. How to target the press. So you have done your research on this is the type of outlet and the type of reporter that might be interested in this. Here is how I'm going to craft my story. I'm going to make sure that it's relevant to this component of my company that I really want to get press on. Here's the hard news I'm going to pull out of it, and here's the trend I'm going to tie it to. And then now you want to target it, right? So you recall the reach and location of the outlets you're considering and the titles and types of people you want to approach. So you're going to focus on, most likely, on the beat in the industry that you work or that the story falls into. If you happen to have, and it happens all the time, I have stories all the time that we pitch on behalf of clients that don't fall perfectly into a technology beat. Actually, advertising and marketing stories, there are great publications on a national trade level, like an Adweek, all the way down to some of the marketing technology publications, etc., when you're looking at marketing stories. But on a national stage, they don't get as much attention. So, if you're looking to tell a story in advertising or marketing, you might look to a reporter in the industry that this advertising or marketing is affecting. So say that this story is about marketing in the healthcare industry. You might target a healthcare reporter for that if you can't find a great person who's covering marketing topics. So take a step back, look at the different beats is just another fancy way of saying like topic, interest, write down a laundry list of these are the industries and beats and topics that my story touches, and then see where the reporters are that fall into each of those categories. So the larger, more well-known, farther reaching the outlet is, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Forbes, the less likely they are to cover a B2B angle on their own. So I'm just throwing this out there for anybody who works for a B2B company or brand, or does a lot of marketing or advertising with B2B companies. We do mostly B2B, so you will need a consumer tie or a tie to the marketplace, investors, especially for like business publications, in order to attract interest from them. So let me give you a quick example. We have a client who is a health IT technology. This is a technology that integrates with the electronic medical record that you see when you go to the doctor, that the doctor uses when you go to a doctor's appointment or go to the hospital. Truly B2B. It never affects me as the patient. But in order to place national media stories, there are ways to position them as experts on health technology and the electronic health record, and show how what their technology is doing within there ultimately benefits me as the patient. So we look to make that tie when we try to pitch national publications, even though the client themselves doesn't actually touch that patient, isn't really involved with that patient in the day-to-day of the business. But the more national that you go, the more you're going to need that human interest tie, that consumer interest angle, because those publications are far-reaching. They're meant for everybody, right? So they want to capture, Joe Schmo, the everyday person, and their level of interest, versus as you get into more niche or trade or industry publications, they don't need the tie to the everyday person or consumer. So that is one of the things you can think through when you're thinking about why a publication exists and is it a fit for me because of the types of stories it tells and the reader that it serves. Okay, so that's a wrap on sort of an intro to media relations and pitching. So I hope that you've grasped the concept more of here's some things to consider as I pick an outlet and pick a reporter. Here's particularly how I build my story and make it most interesting to them. If you're going to take anything away, how you build the story is the most important part. If you pitch a really good story to the wrong reporter, but it's really good, it's highly likely that they're going to share it with the right person in their organization. We see that happen a lot. We think a story is a great fit for reporter X, and they say, I actually roped in reporter Y because this is a better fit for their beat. It's hard to tell sometimes, what someone's really interested in. Or why they covered something. So if you could focus on one area to start playing around with when it comes to media relations, you want to focus on the middle component of this presentation. And I will just plug a little bit briefly here about the boot camp that we have. So again, we've created this online course because people come to us all the time with, one story, or they just want the Orlando Business Journal, or they just want to be in TechCrunch. And if they had the right know-how, they could achieve that on their own. You can get one media hit on your own. You don't necessarily need this expensive public relations partner. So that's what this course is designed for. And we've had some really positive feedback from the people who have taken it, and just gaining confidence in reaching out to the media, because they're a little scary to some people. They're scary to me every day. And I work with them all the time. You learn to have really thick skin, but it's absolutely worth trying to craft the best narrative you can and put it out there. So I will wrap my presentation on that, and then open it up for some questions here.
Thank you, Ashley. That was very, very insightful, and appreciate your time and walking through that presentation. Our first question actually came from Terry. Terry, do you want to read it out since we have you live on camera?
Sure, just had to unmute. Thank you. Thanks, Ralphie. So, and thanks, Ashley. So, I know very little about PR, only I've seen it happening a few times in my career around me, kind of deal, right? So so I have actually two questions on there, and one might precede the other. Do you have any kind of guidelines if you're not a PR professional, but you think you have a story that's shareable and that, you find the right publication and the right journalist, how do you present it to them? Do you have to present it in the form of a press release, or can you write it as a story or a brief of some kind?
Sure. Yeah, and I dig into this more in the course, so I could have put that in there from a format perspective.
Yeah.
I would argue that more often than not, you don't need a press release. So when you are trying to achieve a bunch of media hits and do this huge launch, and you're doing public relations all the time, then there might be a reason to invest in a cadence of press releases. But more often than not, you're just looking to send a very strategic and concise pitch or story idea to a reporter. The press release is just a tool that we use when I'm pitching on behalf of a client. It's that email that seals the deal initially. It's that outreach. Sometimes it's a phone call, but I know that you asked about following up with journalists via email or phone call. I mean, it's pretty much all done via email for most brands. I mean, unless you're Apple calling up to offer a secret, drop on a product to a tech reporter at the Wall Street Journal, most of us are not dealing with that level of information. So it's mostly done over email. You want a attention-grabbing subject line, a concise pitch that details the elements of that narrative that we talked about developing. And then they may say, say it's a product launch, hey, do you have a press release about the new technology? And it would be great to have something on hand because it's just what they're going to look at to say, here are the facts about what you're telling me, but it is not necessary. And I find that a lot of companies get really hung up on the press release. They think the press release is the key component of the story, and it's not necessarily the case. The reporter can tell the story by just interviewing you or grabbing information from you back and forth over email. It's just a tool.
Okay, great, thanks. Rafi, are there any other
Hey,
questions?
Ashley. Yep, we got some questions that came in privately. The first question is, what are some initial mistakes someone who's new to PR makes in their role, and what advice do you have for them?
The first mistake that people make in their role is not understanding that the media is not there to serve you. So their news and their pitch comes off way too self-serving. There's zero attempt to make it interesting from the reader's perspective. It's just all self-serving. It's we have done this. And I want you to cover that we've done this because we think we're cool and important. And that's how the email comes off or the pitch reads. So, I will have pitches where I'm promoting a piece of company news or product that we've been, tasked with or told by the client is important. But the pitch reads more like leads with the trend or tells the reporter first why the area that this story is in is interesting, and then tells them, here's something a company's doing that falls into this category. So first and foremost, they're leading too promotional, and it's a really fine line. It definitely takes time to master, but a good place to start is identifying, if you are a marketing person being tasked from your company to get some public relations, because let's be honest, a lot of times before a PR partner comes in or a PR person, it's the marketing lead that the CEO is like, hey, can you do this for me? And they're like, yeah, I guess it kind of falls in my wheelhouse, sure. The best thing you can do is say, I'm going to look at what are the top 5 publications I could want this company to be in, and start there. Identify who your target people are and just reach out to them, introduce who you are, tell them what's cool about the industry that you're in and the things that you're doing, and then start telling them company news. But show them that, hey, I have an expert for you anytime you have any topics that fall into these categories, or we're going to have a big product launch coming up soon, and here's why it is important to your readers. A great line to include is, here's why it's important to your readers. Like, just literally saying that flat out helps them decipher the story. So that's a really long answer full of tips on basically how to not make yourself too promotional.
No, that's awesome. Thank you, Ashley. And another question that came in is, how has social media changed the PR landscape?
So social media, actually, I do not post myself as a social media expert, so let me just say that. But what it's done for us in terms of the work that we do on the media relations side is that, one, it's given companies and our clients an outlet for things happening in the company that they should have publicly out there for anybody who's looking at them, but maybe it's not right for press. So you hired a new person in a leadership role. The media is not just going to cover that you hired a new person in a leadership role. Again, unless you're Apple and Apple's hiring a new CEO, that's not news that media is following. But social media is a great place for that information to live. So it does give another outlet for things that maybe aren't as newsworthy. The second thing I would say is that it's given us a way to expand the reach of some of the things that we do. So we now no longer have to let the story we placed in Wired be the only, effort that, the effort, dies there. The story's published, it's out, we're done. Now the client can put budget behind promoting that piece. That's a great third-party endorsement of their brand, or a powerful thought leadership piece. So, you know, now we have the opportunity to extend the reach of the press hits that we get.
Awesome. So do we have any last minute questions in the chat box? But thank you, Ashley. I think most of us who are on this call live in the advertising world, to just step in that PR box, which sometimes people bucket in the same area, which we know it's vastly different. It's been very helpful and informative. So thank you for your time and your expertise.
Yeah, and I am happy to, you know, be a listening ear for anybody that has any questions, and you know, we'll send around a link for the boot camp. But you know, I'm always around to pick my brain, so feel free.
Awesome, everyone. Well, if we don't have any last minute questions, there will be a recording of this webinar available afterwards. If you have any questions, please send it to us at info@aaforlando.com or .org, excuse me. We'll get that to Ashley. But thank you. Terry, do we have any closing remarks or anything before we wrap up?
Thanks, Rafi. Just to echo you, thank you very much, Ashley. We really appreciate you taking the time today to do your presentation for us. It is really interesting for, like Rafi said, advertising folks who have kind of heard about PR going on down the hallway kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, those are all great stuff. That was really tactical and really great direction and tips. So we really appreciate that. I'll plug your Breakthrough Bootcamp as well. So if anybody wants to know more, they can visit AMPR's website and reach out to Ashley for that. And I also want to thank you, Ashley, for your service to AAF Orlando. You did act as our PR communications person in the past, so we always appreciate that. Yeah. So I think, you know, that's about it. Everybody, if anybody's on this presentation and you don't currently follow AAF Orlando, please go to our website. You can sign up for our email newsletter and then visit the social media platform of your choice and find us and follow us there. And you can keep informed on all the news about AAF Orlando and our upcoming programs as well. We don't do a lot of PR support, Ashley, you know how it is. But we just need members to kind of follow us so they can all take advantage of programs just like this. So thank you very much, and thanks attendees, and we will see you at the next one.